to look at Notre Dame based off of how they bounced back from losing their first two games of the season. But as I've said for weeks now, head-to-head has to matter. So it's one of those things where, at least in my opinion, the committee probably got it right. But if I'm Notre Dame, I feel a little bit hard done. But you lost to Miami. There was no way Miami would stay behind you after losing the head-to-head. So pretty college football-centric show on this Monday afternoon. We do have a lot of NFL to get to as well, as your weekend of pro football will culminate tonight with the Eagles and the Chargers, which should be a good game. It's a big game for both these two teams. Looks like the Marion Hampton kid is going to give it a go. He's been on the IR, I think, since week 4. And the Eagles looking to bounce back now. Both teams at 8-4. Chargers, they're 5-2 at SoFi. The Eagles are 4-2 on the road. So, fun day of NFL football. A lot of surprising, matchups. And Shedeur Sanders looks like he's going to lock down that QB1 job in Cleveland. The Broncos continue to roll with a win over the hapless Raiders. Big one between the Bears and the Packers. Jordan Love was able to get that done, and they win. So, the Kansas City Chiefs, as of now, looks like this quote-unquote dynasty might be crumbling right before our eyes. They lose another one, this one at home to the Texans. Every time I watch that Texans defense, it's just so impressive, man. So the Chiefs have some work to do for sure. So we'll get into some pro football storylines. A tough piece of news for the Utah Mammoth is Logan Cooley is out indefinitely with a lower body injury. Logan leads the team in goals with 14 on the year. And so a up-and-down season for the Mammoth gets a little bit worse as Logan Cooley's going to sit out now for a little bit. No word on when he'll return. So we'll get to the latest with the Mammoth. On the NBA side of things, the Utah Jazz got by OKC over the weekend. They've lost 2 straight, one to the Knicks, then the other to the Thunder. They allowed 146 points to the Knicks at MSG, 131 points to the Thunder. And there is a awesome video circulating of Will Hardy just undressing his team. Color for language, so not safe for work. I would make sure that you're not around the family if you decide to pull up the video of Will Hardy. The Jazz are off tonight. They're actually off for a few days now. Be back in action on the road against Memphis. So, latest with the Jazz, of course, the college hoop scene continues to be pretty interesting. Utah picked up a win over the weekend. BYU won on Friday. And we'll kind of get to all the angles in that direction as well. So, happy Monday to you. Hope you had a great, fantastic weekend full of football and fun, family, friends, whatever you decided to do. We'll start things off today with a Monday guest who's consistent on the show during college football, Scott Mitchell. Scott will be our first guest, of course, former Ute quarterback, and now on our broadcast team. We'll catch up with Scott about the Big 12 championship, talk about Utah's bowl destination, and a very important offseason starts now, quite frankly, for Utah football to be able to retain key pieces and add to after a solid recruiting class signed on the dotted line a week ago. We'll get the latest with our friends down south as Spencer Linton from BYU TV will join us. I believe Spencer was in Lubbock. Arlington. Lubbock is where Texas Tech plays, but Arlington was where the Big 12 championship was. So get the latest on the BYU scene. We'll do some Utes with Scott, some BYU with Spencer Linton. We'll bounce around with Bill Bush. And what a day to have Notre Dame alum and broadcasting legend Ted Robinson on the show. I'm sure Uncle Ted is in his feelings today, as most Notre Dame alums are. So a lot of college football, that'll kind of dominate the landscape of the show with Scott Mitchell, Spencer Linton, Bill Bush, Ted Robinson, me, Spence Checketts. All of you, the great listeners, hello. How are you? Happy Monday. And that guy, Porter Larson. So we said on Friday, BYU was probably just going to have to win to get into the CFP. But, we said, okay, if Bama gets trounced and BYU keeps it close, will that be enough? It probably wasn't, because at the end of the day, for the second time, BYU just gets their brakes blown off by a really good football team. What stood out most to you?
Yeah, a Texas Tech team that, and when you say they had to win for BYU, but the only other option if you wanted to get in was to make that thing real close, right? To show that there wasn't a team in the playoff that you don't really have a chance in getting past. Kind of gave the committee an out with BYU. I'm surprised that a 3-loss team is in. At a certain point, it is the SEC Invitational, the Big Ten Invitational, as we've talked about. For the most part, right, I do think that we have 12 of the best 15 or so teams in college football, and I think when it's all said and done, Spencer, we will have the best team in college football holding the trophy. And for that reason, I'm glad about the playoff. But, man, the whole process has left a pretty sour taste in my mouth. And when you look at the state of college football and the TV money, and you keep going down that rabbit hole, I think I have a little good reason for that sour taste.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are with you. And for such a great sport to have such an arbitrary process to try to crown its champ, it's long been weird. It's hard to explain. When you try to explain it to somebody who doesn't follow it, they're like, wait, what? It's a weird dynamic, and unfortunately, it will end with both BYU and Utah on the outside looking in, but we'll break all these games down. We'll get you ready for a bowl season and do some NFL today as well. Scott Mitchell, our first guest right out of the gates, but on a Monday afternoon, courtesy of our good friends and your good friends, too, at Prize Picks. It is time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN 700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
So the Big 12 championship played over the weekend. So, essentially we move on to bowl season, and we know what the CFP is going to look like. BYU was able to qualify for the Big 12 championship game for the first time in their program's history. Of course, this is only their third year. And Texas Tech wins the Big 12 for the first time ever. So congratulations to Texas Tech. Definitely worthy champions this year. Hell of a job by Coach McGuire, and obviously bankrolled by Cody Campbell. The addition of talent was very easy to see. It was very apparent for any of us here in Salt Lake when Texas Tech rolled up to Rice-Eccles Stadium. And after, as we've talked about quite a bit, after about a 3.5-quarter rock fight, they just pulled away, beat Utah 34-10. It was a battle early on, but you could see that it was Texas Tech's defense and their presence and physicality in the trenches that were changed. This is a program that, historically speaking, has had great quarterbacks, great offenses, and a lot of really, really good skill position players that have allowed them to rack up points, but it really was in the trenches that they had struggled, historically speaking, and that obviously was fixed this year. So they're the best team in the Big 12. They're deserving champs. They earned it on the field, and they earned the right to head on over to the CFP, where they are going to be a top 4 team, and they will have a first-round bye after a really special season. Interesting stuff from Kalani postgame, basically acknowledging that Texas Tech is who BYU wants to be. And BYU got off to a good start. And after the first 8 or 9 minutes, I'm going, okay, maybe there's a shot here to at least, keep it close. The line did not change prior to kickoff. BYU entered that game as a 12.5-point underdog, a 12.5-point underdog. Texas Tech didn't just win. They didn't just cover. After a little bit of an auspicious start where it looked like Tech had some nerves. A tremendous amount of BYU fans in attendance. You could see the blue all over the place on television. It was Tech's defense that settled in and played the way Tech's defense has played all year long. BYU has to run the football to win, and they had moments with LJ healthy. It looked like Bear Bachmeier was either not healthy prior to the game or picked up an ankle sprain, looked like a high ankle sprain during the game. He was clearly compromised, but if we just call it how it is, even with a fully healthy Bear Bachmeier and a fully healthy roster, BYU's had 2 opportunities to show they belong in Texas Tech's cul-de-sac, and they have failed miserably with both opportunities. And oftentimes this really does come down to stylistically, the old cliche, styles make fights. Nobody runs the ball on Tech. Nobody. And BYU, one of the top 2 or 3 rushing attacks in the Big 12 all year long, with a big kid at quarterback who can make plays, and the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year in LJ Martin, they just simply showed, A, they want to, and B, they have to run the football if they want to be successful this year. The exceptions have been maybe against competition that isn't top shelf, where Bears had some good games through the air. They just could not get anything going. They finished with 63 rushing yards, an average of 2.1 per carry. Bears 16 of 27, 115 yards, an average of 4.3 yards per completion. Those 2 interceptions are going to kill you. His QBR was 30.5, which I believe is a season low. And Chase Roberts did play, not very effective. The receivers simply could not find space. I mean, over and over and over, it was either L.J. Martin out of the backfield or just a lot of checkdowns to L.J. from Bear. He had 7 catches, which led the team by far. And after the game, a lot of people, and then, the fumbles, L.J. had 1, Bear had 2, and they lost 2 of the 3 fumbles they put on the deck. So 4 total turnovers, and that obviously is always going to kill you when it comes to trying to upset a team that's heavily favored over you. Texas Tech only had 1 fumble. It was the Jacoby Williams kid, put it on the deck, but they didn't lose it. And Baron Morton was as good as I think he's been in a long, long time, which was the dynamic that a lot of people thought BYU could exploit. Baron has just been fine this year. For all of Tech's dominance, their quarterback, I believe, is 6th overall in QBR as far as the conference rankings go. But he goes 20 of 33, 215 yards, couple of touchdowns, no picks. And BYU now heads to Florida to take on a good Georgia Tech team when it comes to their bowl destination. The Pop-Tarts Bowl down in Orlando 2 days after Christmas, December the 27th at 1:30 p.m. So now today, BYU fans feeling a little bit, I think, as far as what Utah fans felt after the final game of the year, the win over Kansas, which culminated a 5-game winning streak to end the year. So a 10-2 season for Utah, 7-2 in conference play. Awesome year. No other way around it. And if you're a BYU fan, winning 11 games, the first time in a number of years you've done that. 4 10-win seasons in 6 years now for Kalani, an 8-1 conference record, and going to the Big 12 championship. Both Utah and BYU took tangible steps forward this year. We were hoping to see a bounce-back year for Utah. We saw that, and then BYU was able to find a way, even while losing your starting quarterback, a mere matter of weeks before the start of the season, BYU was able to find a way to improve their lot as well. Another step up after a rough year 1 in the Big 12, better year 2. Year 3, you go to the conference championship. I'm sure they have premonitions of hanging banners down there sooner rather than later. Utah's bowl destination, as we thought it would be, will be the Vegas Bowl against Nebraska on New Year's Eve at 1:30. Of course, we'll have that game for you. Nebraska out of the Big Ten, 4-5 in conference this year, 7-5 overall. We thought it might be Iowa. That was thrown around. Illinois thrown around. So a good bowl for Utah, a good bowl for BYU, but neither team qualifies for the CFP after a very promising start to the year. All right, big offseason ahead for the Utes. Can they retain both Devin and Bird? Can they add to the group maybe some playmakers on the outside? We'll talk to Scott Mitchell about all those dynamics, get into some local and national college football storylines, move over to Spencer Linton, Bill Bush, and Ted Robinson. Busy Monday show, and it's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. All right, we got Monday Night Football tonight. It will be the Eagles and the Chargers. Alex Jensen's coach's show can be heard after we say goodnight at 6 o'clock. We know the bowl destination for the Utes. It is the Vegas Bowl on New Year's Eve against Nebraska. Our next guest, of course, you know him, you love him, played quarterback here. He's now on our broadcast team. Happy Monday, Scott Mitchell. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. It's really nice to talk to you. So
always appreciate the time, Scott. Always appreciate the time. So let's start with some Utes, even though they haven't played in a couple weeks now, and we'll get to the Big 12 championship in the CFP. But, you know, you could do worse than the Vegas Bowl, right? And Nebraska, kind of a mid-tier Big Ten team, up and down after, a good start to the year. They started 5-1, stumbled down the stretch, losing 3 of 4, including at Penn State, Iowa. They did beat UCLA at the Rose Bowl. But now that we know the bowl destination, what do you think? You looking forward to it?
You know, bowls are kind of a funny thing. It feels like bowl games are becoming like the Pro Bowl. You know, you have all these teams that are like, yeah, we're going to opt out of the bowl, or Notre Dame, hey, we didn't get into the college football playoffs. We're going to take our ball and go home. We're not going to a bowl game. You have so many players opting out. It's getting kind of weird. And I always got excited for bowl games. I can't say that I'm just like jazzed to the moon over the Vegas Bowl, simply because, you know, I've kind of been there quite a bit. You know, I enjoy Vegas to a point, you know, so I'm not like this super fan of Vegas. You know, and it's when you've been there, especially just a couple of years ago, it'd be kind of nice to go somewhere else. I don't know what else. I was kind of hoping for a Holiday Bowl appearance, but it's not the worst thing in the world, and I'll take it. I mean, it is New Year's Eve, so it's kind of getting, I guess, more clout and cachet than maybe in the past. But, you know, I guess when you're kind of hoping to get in the playoffs and you don't, it's got to be a little bit of a disappointment.
Yeah, I think both BYU fans and Utah fans probably right now existing in the same sentiment, which is, okay, that was fun. That was a good season. However, hoping it would culminate for more. Does it, like Utah fans were experiencing this a couple weeks back after the Kansas game, and now after what happened with BYU over the weekend, I think it's safe to say, Scott, both teams had really good seasons, but both fan bases probably were left wanting for a little bit more.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, 10-2 is a heck of a season for Utah. It's a heck of a season, you know, in every regard. I mean, what an incredible year, and you know, the two teams you lose to, really, your quarterback is kind of halfway injured. He's not full strength. You know, I don't know how good BYU really is. They really had all the breaks roll their way all year long. And, you know, so you lose to the two top teams in the league. Texas Tech, I think, is a very good football team. So it's, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world to lose them. But, boy, it's been a great year. And I think it should be rewarded with more. I just don't know that I don't know that the Las Vegas Bowl is really a reward. It's more kind of like, yeah, okay, that was pretty predictable. That was pretty obvious. You know, it'd be fun to kind of be excited. I don't know. I want to go to the Pop-Tart Bowl, all right, just because it's the Pop-Tart Bowl. But it's also in Orlando, and it I don't know, just be fun, because for me, there's, you know, Disney World is just a fun thing to, I don't know, it's fine.
Wow, we have a despondent Scott Mitchell on the show today, preferring the child version of Disney World as opposed to the adult playground version of Las Vegas. Am I understanding this correctly?
I don't gamble, so it's not that. I go to Las Vegas. So I love. I went and saw the Wizard of Oz in the Sphere. Oh my goodness, it was amazing. And I've been to a lot of concerts and shows in Las Vegas that are great. Amazing food in Las Vegas, which, you know, is something that I agree with. Good food, it likes me. But, you know, I can go to Las Vegas anytime. I want to go somewhere where I don't necessarily go all the time. And again, Spence, this is just merely like me being selfish and petty and petulant and all these things. because I'm just so mad about, what this season could have possibly been with a couple of more wins or maybe even one more win.
Yeah, and look, I want to be clear. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not a huge Vegas guy. But ultimately, when it comes to any bowl game that is not involved with the college football playoff, what really is the benefit? And I'm asking sincerely as somebody who played the game, because,
Sure.
whether it's Orlando for the Pop-Tarts for BYU against Georgia Tech, or whether it's Utah, Vegas, Nebraska, New Year's Eve, like, the majority of teams in college football are in the ecosystem that includes a bowl game that really doesn't mean much. Like, ultimately, what are the rewards that can be, gleamed when it comes to a bowl that isn't involved in the CFP?
Well, typically that's what a bowl game was. It was the reward. It was the celebration. It was, the game was really just kind of an afterthought, but it was the experience. It was like, let's bring the family. Let's really go and let's enjoy this. And I don't know that people necessarily took it seriously. And so it was that reward. When I was in college, there weren't very many bowls. And so the Holiday Bowl was like everything, and it meant so much. And now that there's so many, that it kind of, I guess, lessened the excitement or the meaning behind it. I mean, I was recruited by teams that said we go to a bowl game every year, and that meant something. And now it certainly doesn't mean it. But the reward now, I think, if it's not the college football playoffs, it's the fact that you get to practice with these players, and that's huge for the future development of your program. And it's really so much more for the younger players than it is, maybe the guys that are graduating. And there's a lot of guys, the ones especially that are going on to the next level, they go, now this is over. My brain and my body and everything is focused on the future. But the ones that are left, I think and I believe there is a lot of value in that too, by the way. Getting that extra practice time, it does put you ahead, because refs are so valuable and precious in college football that any place you can find them, whether it's, postseason, bowl season for 2 or 3 weeks, they mean a lot. And a lot of these young guys are excited about it because they've kind of been caged up, and now it's their time to kind of step forward and show what they can do and get opportunities to prove their worth. And so and that's really about it. I mean, other than that, I don't know how much, it could potentially be a place where you do some recruiting when you're at a bowl game, if it's in an area that you recruit well. Just it kind of depends. But other than that, there's really not a whole lot that there is a benefit to it.
All right, so when it comes to the dynamic of deciding whether or not you actually want to play in the bowl game, we've seen it recently with the Utes. Clark Phillips was, elected not to play in the bowl game so he could prepare for the draft. And when it comes to a player like, Spencer Fano, who probably is going to be a top 10 pick, you don't really expect those guys to play in bowl games anymore. Is the transactional nature of these decisions something that, as a former player, kind of turns you off? Like, is your opinion like, hey, stick with the team, ride to the end of the year?
Yeah, there are a couple of guys. I think of running back that played at Miami, who was a sure first rounder, gets injured in a bowl game. I don't think they were playing for, a national championship or anything like that at the time. And it really hurt his future. I think it's a real, like you've given the university 4 years or however many years of your life. You've been all in, you've invested, you don't owe anyone anything else. And you have an opportunity, especially like a guy like Spencer Fano. I mean, top 10 money that's a big deal. That's life-changing. That's something that really can have, a great impact in a positive way on your life. At that point, I think it's hard to justify staying to go to the Las Vegas Bowl. like I'd be dumbfounded. I'd be shocked if he was playing. I'd be shocked, and I certainly wouldn't be offended or hurt at all. I would 100% understand it. He's a I mean, the type of money that's available to these players is just astronomical today, and he has nothing left to prove at all. And now, the likelihood of getting hurt, I don't think is like, 50-50 or, it's maybe 95-10 or 98-2. I mean, most guys don't get hurt who play. So I'm sure a lot of players, there's some guys, Spence, that their psyche is, this is who I am. I just have to play. I don't care. And it just makes me sleep better at night. It makes me feel like I'm living to my true North Star, and that I'm loyal and I'm in it till the bitter end type of thing. It's part of what develops my character. If I don't do this, I just won't feel right about it. And I think there's a decent number of guys that maybe think that, and I wouldn't fault them for that either. I just don't. I don't think the game means enough either way to say yes or no. But I think the person's personal reasons matter, and I think that's being true to yourself is very important.
Yeah, some interesting points there because, for those of us that were not able to play on the level you did, but I thought at some point maybe it would be a potential, the thought of not playing, like I can remember the first fall that approached where I wasn't playing basketball. And, I was 19 years old, and and even as somebody who didn't play for anything that really matters, it was really, really somewhat devastating that I wasn't going to be able to play anymore and play the sport that I love and play with my friends. I think from the outside looking in, a lot of people are like, no, I would just want to play as long as I possibly could, because just playing college football and being around these players and coaches seems like a really cool experience. I think a lot of people just view it through that prism, Scott, and maybe that's confusing as to why, some people would choose to not play when most people feel like that would be such a cool opportunity.
So I kind of went through this my last year at Utah. I got my ankle rolled up, or my knee in practice, had a sprained MCL, missed the last 2 games of my junior year. And Coach Fossil got fired, and I was getting massive pressure to leave and go play in the NFL. And I had been told by a lot of people, late first round, second round, you don't have anything left to prove. And I really wanted to stay. I just felt like, from my own psyche, from my own kind of closure, and they're like, look, you got injured in practice. I mean, anything's possible. You have this right in front of you. Why risk it? And so I did. I left, and it gnawed at me. And there's a part of me that it still gnaws at me today, that I just felt like I left some unfinished business on the table. I remember later on, as I watched Peyton Manning in college, and he stayed for his last year. And he says, I'm in college one time. I have this experience once. I'm never going to get it back again. I've had an incredible experience. I want to see it through to the end. And so he stayed for that last year, and it worked out great for him. And it worked out great for me to leave a year early. It was massively beneficial. It gave me an extra year in the NFL, which allowed me to be a free agent when I started to play. So the timing really worked out beautifully for me. But in my brain and in my heart, it didn't always set right. It just felt like, I kind of left, or I wasn't emotionally mature enough to leave at that time, or, I didn't like the circumstances with which I was leaving. And so, it's a hard thing, because we play football, we play sports, basketball, whatever it is, because we love the heck out of it. And if there was never any money in it, we'd still play it. And that's why you play it, because it brings out so much passion and purpose and fun. And so when we get it mixed up with these other things, it kind of gets lost a little bit, and the beauty of it, the love for it, and so it's a hard thing no matter what to reconcile with. But I do know, whatever choice, it's like you need to own your choice. You need to be 100% convicted of it, and know that it's the right thing for you, or it will gnaw at you. You'll wonder. You go, maybe I should have or shouldn't have, or so whatever it is, just own it.
What will this season be remembered for Utah football? It seems like every year you can look back at a seminal moment, one big game. In years past, certainly Pac-12 championships, the USC game here in Salt Lake, a win over a rival. When we do the emotional look back on Utah football 2025, Scott, what will stand out the most?
This will be a funny answer because it's not any game or moment on the field. But it's the emergence of Jason Beck. I just got more and more impressed with Jason as the season went on, and as he developed his system and his offense, and in talking to him before the season even started, and kind of his general philosophy about things. It's like, I don't know what my system is. It's whatever I have, whatever players I have, that's going to be our system. And it was fun to watch him really grow and develop and find that offense as the season went on, and it was an impressive thing to see. And you watch Jason, where he's been a guy that just continues to get better at each place that he's been. That he's created this track record of trust and growth. That you go, this guy's a legitimate, young, really popular coordinator in the country, and I'd love for Utah to keep him around for some time, because I think that first year is the worst and the hardest, and now he's got so much to build off of headed into next year and who knows when. But for me, it was just Jason Beck and what he really built and how he really transformed that offense and really, I think, himself personally.
Yeah, I can't speak to the final part because I'm sure you know him in a way that I don't. But I agree with you. It really is the emergence of what this offense became. In years past, the walking line for Utah football has always been like, all right, the Utes are always an offense away from competing for conference championships. And ironically enough, that was kind of flipped a little bit. The defense was solid again, but the run defense finished ranked near the bottom of the conference. Now, a lot of that had to do with the final few weeks of the season, 3 or 4 games as opposed to looking back all together. But what's the secret sauce there, Scott, to kind of balance this thing out as opposed to have one side of the ball carry the other?
What's the secret sauce to kind of having balance?
So I mean, look, Utah was one of the top 2 offenses pretty much all year long, the best rushing offense in the Big 12. But ironically enough, it was the defensive numbers that kind of came back down to regression of the mean, or whatever you want to call it. How do we get that balance? Because certainly it's going to be balance that's needed to win the conference.
Oh yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, I was really how the simple answer is you go out and raise a bunch of money, and then you can do about what you want. I mean, that's really what it's gotten down to. You look at Texas Tech a year ago; they were kind of in the same situation. They were near the top of the league in offense, and they were near the top or the bottom on defense, and they really went heavy on defense, and they really bought into it, and they really paid for it, and it paid huge dividends for them. And that might be the reality of how things are. I mean, your rosters are going to turn over. You're going to have, it's going to be hard to keep some of these young players that you've done such a great job of developing. But if you have the funds, and I think Utah is at a crossroads in their existence in college football, and it's like I think there's some hard questions that the whole athletic department and everyone involved in it has to ask themselves. How much does it really matter to this program? Where do you want to go with this program? And the answer to that is, well, you need to put your money where your mouth is. I remember Utah went to the Pac-12, and they said, okay, what are we going to do now that we're here? Are we just going to be happy to be here? And they said, no, we're going to invest. We're going to invest in our people. We're going to invest in our infrastructure. And they did it. They put their money where their mouth was, and it paid huge. And now the landscape has changed. It's different. But the similar question is there. What do we do now? And I don't know the answer. I do know the answer. The answer is you gotta find a way to fund your program significantly and to be able to do it year in and year out. And if Utah can figure that out, then there's no reason why they can't compete definitely in the Big 12, but certainly on a national stage as well.
You and I discussed the CFP rankings a couple weeks back and had a fun kind of back and forth and agreed on some and disagreed on others. Let's kind of revisit a little bit. Notre Dame, their AD making the rounds on the Dan Patrick show, really up in their feelings, believe that they belong. Do you believe that Notre Dame has a legitimate beef as far as being upset that they were left out?
So as I thought about this, and I think we're all getting played. And I had to remember something I was taught a long time ago, and this college football selection thing and college football playoffs all together. It reminds me of the movie The Natural, where there was this owner sitting up in his ivory box in the baseball stadium, and he was trying to manipulate an outcome. And there was this guy who came along, The Natural, and all he wanted to do is just play ball. And that's what we all want. We want these teams to just go play ball. We want the team that's best to win. We want to play it out, and whoever wins, right? And that's the way we're wired. But they said no. And that ivory tower is television. And so television is what moves the needle on this. Television is what it matters when it gets right down to it. And so most of those decisions, I firmly believe, are about a brand. And the brand of the SEC is a bigger brand than the brand of Notre Dame. And I believe that's really what it boils down to. And it might be, they might even have research. You think of, look, people who follow the SEC are massively passionate about it, more so than the people that follow Notre Dame. And they go, it's so much better for us to have a 3 in the playoffs because we know that guy in the southern half of the United States, he's going to tune in to that more than they're going to tune into Notre Dame. So we're all sitting here because I just started going through the scenario, Spence, and I just exhausted myself. Why are they making these choices? What's the criteria? One year it's for something. Another year, it's the total opposite. And the reason they left Notre Dame out is because they put someone in, at a different time. And I just think the bottom line is there's a greater agenda. It's some television executive sitting up in his ivory box going, Natural, you're not going to ultimately beat me in this situation. I'm gonna determine the outcome, and I think that's where it is. I really believe that it's gotten so insanely ridiculous that they're finally just going to throw the Natural in the game and just figure out a way to just revamp the whole thing and change it. But so I can't. I wish I could tell you why Notre Dame got in or got out. My best guess is that the TV people just wanted it a different way.
Shout out Robert Redford. Excellent movie. May he rest in peace. Before I set you loose, Scott, Notre Dame declines an invite to play Brigham Young in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. What'd you make of that?
They sound massively petty. It's just like, what are you, 10? Like, I'm going to take my ball home and I'm not going to play anymore. And you guys are going to be in trouble now, and you're going to really miss that I didn't show up. And no one's going to care. Like that move to me is like so, like that's just the worst PR move in the world because you go, we don't really want to expose ourselves. What if we go to a bowl game and BYU beats us and then it validates everyone else? This way we're just like, we'll let them wonder. we'll let them wonder if we were really good enough to do this. And I just think it's a bad optic, a bad move. Because if you had, I think a bowl game between BYU and Notre Dame, oh my goodness, that'd be the best bowl game outside of the college football playoffs in the whole bowl season. And it's just unfortunate that had to happen and that they had to make that choice.
Yeah, no, I agree. That would have been a really, really interesting, intriguing matchup. And then one team or the other would have been proven right or wrong because BYU fans feel like they should be in, Notre Dame fans feel like they should be in. But it's hypothetical. We'll never know, Scott. Thanks for the time, buddy. Have a good week, okay?
You got it. All right, be good. We'll see you.
All right, Scott Mitchell, former Utah quarterback, joining us here on the program. The rest of the show looks like this. Spencer Linton joins us coming up next, then Bill Bush and Ted Robinson. Busy Monday show. Keep it right here. All right, show rolling along today. It's always fun. We can catch up with Jeff Robe from My Hearing Centers. Hello, Jeff. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you, Spence?
I'm well. I appreciate your time. So let's talk about the Signia BCT IX, these hearing aids that you guys have to offer. Let's just talk about kind of the form and function. So listeners who have like the old school hearing aid in their minds with big old bananas on the back of the ears, they need to understand exactly what this product is, Jeff.
Well, it's really cool because they connect to a really great app that you can put right on your phone. And what it allows you to do is actually tailor your hearing experience right in the app. So let's say, for instance, you're in a noisy environment and you don't want to hear all the background noise, but you want to hear the speech much better. You can actually change the settings so that you'll hear the speech. It'll bring that up. You'll hear it much more clearly. And all the other background noise will kind of fade away and not be as prominent, so you can hear people talking a lot better. You can also raise the volume if things are a little bit too soft sounding to you. And these new BCT-IX will actually last for 36 hours just on one charge. And it's a rechargeable battery, so you don't have to fiddle around with putting in hearing aid batteries and dropping them on the floor and that kind of stuff. It's rechargeable. You put them in a little charging case and they charge up very quickly, and then you're good for about 36 hours. So they're really, really much better than what you may have experienced in the past or what you might be used to.
Jeff, when's the best time for folks to get these hearing aids?
Well, the best time is when you think you've got a problem, because you don't want to wait too long. There's a lot of consequences that might come along with waiting. For instance, you are at a greater risk for losing the ability to improve your hearing significantly if you don't get it taken care of early on. Plus, there's a lot of studies that show that hearing loss is actually connected to the chance for higher risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So you want to get it taken care of as soon as you think you might have a problem. We've got some great folks that can help with that.
Jeff, before I set you loose, what's that special offer you have for our listeners who give you a call today?
Well, we're looking for 50 ESPN listeners with problems hearing to take part in a 30-day challenge to evaluate these new Signia BCT-IX devices. We want them to call the number, which is 801-701-1924, and schedule an appointment today, or you can book online at myhearingcenters.com.
So you got to call today. It's 801-701-1924. That's 801-701-1924. 801-701-1924. Also online at myhearingcenters.com. Jeff, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Spence.
There's a video of Will Hardy making the rounds. As Porter referenced during the break, Jerry Sloan would be very proud of Will just launching into his team.
And Frank Layden, to be clear.
Shout out Frank as well. Rest in peace, both. I got to say, Spencer Litton's going to join us, BYU TV. I don't really get, the contract extension is great. The fact that you're being paid handsomely, that's all fine and good. I don't know that there's a profession comprised of more competitive people than professional coaching. At some point, he's got to be so over entering arenas every night up against it because he just doesn't have the talent on his roster.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look where he comes from. Look at where he has spent the better part of his coaching career. He's not used to losing. And he's not used to losing in a way that is, kind of a formality of the state of where your team is, where your roster is at the moment. That's got to be as frustrating as just about anything as a pro basketball coach, especially when it's your first head coaching job and every one of those wins and losses kind of reflects on your record, your resume.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. BYU over the weekend got trounced in the Big 12 championship game 34-7. They're going to head to Orlando to play Georgia Tech in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Our next guest, friend of the show, consistent presence, Spencer Litton, BYU TV. Happy Monday, young man. How are you?
Doing well, Spence. Good to chat with you, man. What a week overall for BYU football, starting with the Satake situation and signing day, and then, just a thud there at the end of the week. But yeah, it's been an emotional roller coaster in Provo, no doubt about it. Definitely
more good than bad, for sure. I mean, we talked about this last week with Ute fans. After the Kansas win, 5 straight wins to close the year. 10-2 overall, 7-2 in conference is an awesome year. It just is. And BYU winning 11 games and playing in the conference championship game is an awesome year. But when it comes to an end the way that it does for Utah, no entrance into the conference championship game and therefore no entrance to the CFP. And with BYU now on the outside looking in, even though both teams had awesome years, it feels like both fan bases are kind of like left wanting more.
Yeah, certainly. And that stems from Utah having a recent history of getting to Pac-12 championship games, winning those games, and being a major player in multiple Rose Bowls. And for BYU, while they haven't cracked through yet to that level in the modern era, just being where they were last year, which was a tiebreaker falling their way from going to a Big 12 championship game and playing Arizona State and having a shot there, and then getting there this year, and to their credit, controlling their own destiny, not needing a tiebreaker to get there. I mean, they were in the captain's chair and they flew that thing the right way at 8-1 in conference play into Arlington, but then losing that game and again being left out of the college football playoff, it leaves the team and coaches with an understandably disappointed feeling in their gut, because they feel like, outside of going undefeated in the regular season, they don't know if they will be considered a legitimate college football playoff entrant unless the conference or the college football playoff expands to 16 teams. And then, you bring BYU and Utah potentially both into that conversation. Obviously, it depends on how the parameters are drawn out, but they're kind of feeling like, okay, is the only way to get in the playoff to expand this thing? Because if so, then let's just take this thing to 16 and see what happens there.
Yeah, and you referenced the Kalani stuff, so it's been a few weeks since you and I have been able to catch up. So even though it's yesterday's news, I wanted to get in it with you. It was an emotional roller coaster for the Checketts household. I was fielding phone calls from worried BYU fans like, is this going to happen? I never thought he was going to leave. Now, that comes from somebody who's not close to the situation. I don't know how close it was to happening. Penn State is an elite college football program. It's an elite job. And if there is something that maybe would make him look twice, maybe it is a position like this. I'm happy the way that it ended. Very happy for Kalani. Very happy for A-Rod and Jay and the coaches that appear to be taken care of on a level that maybe they weren't prior to. And then you get some NIL guarantees. And I'm not saying he did it intentionally, but it certainly turned out to be a real big benefit. And it feels like Kalani played it the right way. And you guys down there will keep your coach. What was that roller coaster like for you guys to cover down there?
Crazy, to put it into one singular word. And being very close to the situation, I legitimately thought he was going to leave, Spence. And this is because Kalani, you said he played it the right way, and he did. He had to be ready to put his ducks in a row and go if BYU could not meet his baseline needs and demands for what he wants to do with this program. And he had been asking for that for months. I mean, frankly, some aspects of it for a few years, and just didn't feel like he was being heard all the way. And I'm not pointing fingers at anyone in particular on one side or the other. Just let me be clear about that, because when you get to these high-level conversations and big dollars and contracts, and like it's way above my pay grade. But I do know that Kalani was feeling like he was not being heard in spite of constantly knocking on the door like, hey, we just went 11-2 and won the Alamo Bowl, and here we are again this season. Now we're in the Big 12 championship game. Like, can we lock this thing up? Can I get my minimum standards met here so that I can take care of my assistant coaches and my players and create enough staff around me and put things in place to feel like we can get to that next level, that BYU can get to the level that Utah has been at, where you're going to a Rose Bowl and a major player and winning a conference championship, or even a Texas Tech this year. Like BYU, they are pushing to get to that level, and he felt like strongly he needed some things to change. And so when he felt like he wasn't being heard, he had to be ready to go. And so Sunday night, early Monday morning, I really felt like he was going to go to Penn State unless some type of miracle came together. And so I don't really think BYU fans and fans of football across the state in the Big 12 know just how close he was to going to State College. Conversations had happened. There were arrangements for the staff members he was going to take with him to get their affairs in order and be ready to go if and when he pushed the green light on that contract with the Nittany Alliance. Now, thankfully, there are some people in the athletic department that realize what he means to BYU and the fact that he is, in many ways, BYU football. You just aren't going to find anybody else like him. Like who? I love Jay Hill. Jay Hill is incredible, but it would take a while for Jay to build into what Kalani is doing right now, and the disruption that could have occurred for the best recruiting class in BYU football history, and the staff upheaval, and then the players that go with him through the portal and NIL. It just would have set BYU back multiple years, and taking a guy like Jay Hill, if he were named the head coach at BYU, a while to build up to that. And so it was so necessary for BYU to figure this thing out. But it's Kalani, in his words, says, it was as close as it could have possibly been to me leaving. And I'm so glad I didn't have to. I'm so glad that I got the resources and things that I needed to keep my staff and players and my vision in place here at BYU. He didn't want to go. No doubt about it. He did not want to go, but he had to be ready to go, and the threat had to be imminent. And we had to take this thing to DEFCON 1 before the message was actually heard. And then the right parties started to move to give him the opportunity to stay.
So when it comes to the dynamic of Brigham Young actually stepping up and paying their coaches now, whether it's Kalani or Kevin or the assistants, it is a new approach. It, in my opinion, is the right way to go, and I think it's necessary. Now, certainly when you're at a conference, the Big 12, and the rev share is going to kick in fully next year, you're just in a better spot financially than you were during independence. But to kind of go off your premise, or what you're saying as far as how close it actually was, if this was going to go down, part of me thought, like, okay, go take your 10, 11 million per year for Penn State. We're going to slide Jay over a seat. We're going to pay him $4 million, and then we'll just save the 7 and march on as BYU does and get results with Jay. So are you surprised that the financial asks were as close to being met as they really ever have been down there?
I was surprised that it happened so fast, just because in the history of BYU athletics, things do not move quickly. But this one, by necessity, had to move at a lightning pace. The right people had to be called, the right administrators had to be brought in, the right conversations had to happen, and Kalani had to feel like he was in a safe place to stay. And it all came together so quickly. Like I said, man, it feels like it's going to take an act of heaven to keep Kalani here at BYU, and some significant conversations and backing for the resources that he is asking for. And then a few hours later, it had happened. And at some point we will be able to name names. Like, I want to write a book on how this whole thing played out when the statute of limitations runs out and there's no clause in the contract that says you can't say certain things. It was a fascinating behind the scenes ordeal, and just so grateful for BYU and their players and staff that they could figure this thing out. So shocking to see how fast it went. Not surprised that there were enough people that came to not the rescue, but just they came to play in hopes of keeping Kalani, and the support. And I mean, you saw this huge, swell, this wave of love for Kalani, and it was like, oh gosh, we got to figure something out. This is insane. And you're right, BYU probably would have, that's what they do. They march on, but it would have taken a while, and it would have felt like a death in the family for BYU fans if he had left. Now, there's some misconceptions about how the funding actually happens and how Kalani is actually paid, and BYU doesn't make that public. They keep it private as to how the funding happens. But there is some truth in what has been put out there, that the university, with the help of TV rev share and some other things like that, make it happen. But these independent donors that are getting credit for being the reason that Kalani stayed at BYU, it's just not true in the capacity that they are paying Kalani. Like, these outside companies are not paying Kalani directly to stay at BYU. You can't do it. BYU won't allow that to happen legally. But they can help with NIL and bringing in talent and doing some things around him for support staff and players. But it's really interesting how those narratives start and then people just run with it. So the idea that, the entire Mormon church and Cookie Bro are the reasons that BYU beat Penn State, like, it's not as simple as that, but it does create, fun narratives for us to discuss.
Regardless of what's true, the Cookie Bro dynamic is too perfect to just push to the side. I mean, it is such an excellent, BYU-centric story that the CEO of Crumble Cookie sees the bat signal and decides to get off the sidelines and ultimately is writing checks. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying let me have a good BYU story, please.
Let's go with it. I'm all for it. We need good stories.
Fair enough. All right, so Pop-Tarts Bowl, Orlando. Let's start with the Notre Dame side of this. Your thoughts on them, because BYU Notre Dame would have been the best non-CFP bowl matchup. And Georgia Tech's a decent team. They're a top 25 team. It's still going to be a fine game. But the potential of BYU Notre Dame was really intoxicating for a number of reasons, because you have two fan bases that are upset that they're left out, two teams that would love to prove that they did belong. And that head-to-head matchup would have shown a lot of people who's right and who's wrong. But your thoughts on the bowl destination for the Cougars, and then attendant to it, your thoughts on Notre Dame electing to tap out?
Oh, man, I mentioned, Kalani asked me after I did my post-game interview with him on the field in Arlington, said, okay, so what are our most likely options? And I said, man, the Pop-Tarts Bowl has been all over BYU for a while now, and there's real momentum that you could see Notre Dame if Notre Dame doesn't get into the playoff. And Kalani just said, oh, man, if we don't get in to the playoff and that's the matchup, let's go. Like, he was super excited about that. And for all the reasons you just pointed out, we all were salivating over that potential to have this game that has been discussed so hypothetically in resumes between the two fan bases of who deserves to be in and who doesn't, like, play it on the field. And so it was really exciting, and the buildup was so fun. And then all of a sudden, reports start to leak out that Notre Dame's just not going to play. They're essentially going to opt out because they want to stick it to the man of ESPN and tell the College Football Playoff Committee to pound sand, and they're not going to allow anybody to make money off of their brand through advertising, and they're boycotting the current bowl system. And I understand why Notre Dame felt like they needed to take a stand to institute change in college football and get rid of this corruption. Like, I get it, but it doesn't make it any less disappointing for just the general sport. And to be able to see that quality of a game and have two of those name brand opponents that wanted to go out and prove on the field that they belong, like you said, that would have been such an entertaining matchup. But then Notre Dame fans are my mentions all day, yesterday and today, saying, well, it wouldn't even been the right product because we're going to have so many players opt out. Like, we're not going to put a less than favorable product on the field against BYU only to diminish the incredible season that we had and deserved to be included into the 12-team playoff and blah, 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 blah. Like, I get it. You were going to have some guys opt out. I had two people say literally, this game is so below Notre Dame. It's so below Notre Dame and what we deserve. Like, oh my gosh, the arrogance. Like, it's amazing. If you wanted to be in the playoffs, go and beat Miami or Texas A&M. That's all you had to do. And you didn't. You didn't. Like, you dominated everybody else except for Boston College, who's not a good team. But you dominated everybody else, but you lost the two most important games on your schedule. You're an independent. Like, trust me, BYU understands the necessity of having to go 11-1 or undefeated as an independent to, like, be in that conversation. And they are not even close to what the respect that you have garnered in the ACC contract. Like, but we get it to a degree, like the importance of winning your toughest games, and you didn't. For whatever reason, you didn't. So it's just, that's really tough to sit on. Like, just this a general arrogance of, oh, Notre Dame's so above this. They're not going to play in some gimmicky bowl game and blah, blah, blah. It just, I have a really hard time with that. Would have loved to see it. I think Georgia Tech is a good opponent. Haynes King is a good player, and I think he's getting healthier at quarterback. He's a great dual threat. It's a challenge to face their offense. Their defense is mediocre, but their offense is really good. It'll be a good challenge for BYU's defense, and I think most BYU players will opt in. We'll see about L.J. Martin, but I think everybody else is going to opt in. So just a disappointing thing, and I feel like there's a few simple changes we can make, Spence. Maybe you disagree with this, but I think it really comes down to three things, and I posted this on social media yesterday because I felt so strongly about it. But I think, one, you have to expand to at least 16 teams, and two, you need a net rankings metric like NCAA basketball has, but for football. Like, there needs to be a primary sorting tool of some degree that helps kind of align things. I'm not saying it has to be full computers and no human element, but like limit the human element to come in at the very end and say, okay, well, this matchup can't happen because these two teams just played 2 weeks ago, or we need to modify this just a little hair. Okay. But for the most part, numbers and math are doing this thing. And then get rid of the freaking college football playoff ranking shows, because I think they're an absolute debacle. And it creates these false perceptions, and they're so all over the place, and the goalposts moving. Like, it's a joke. Just have one Selection Sunday show and call it good. Like, I think that's where it starts. And oh man, what a day, brother. It gives us great content to talk about, but what a day.
Yeah, for sure. And I do agree with you. And I actually think it's tough because ESPN is in the TV business and they want you to watch their TV show. And so they probably like the debates. They like the back and forth. They like that we're all kind of huddled around our TVs on Tuesday evening during the college football season to watch it. But no matter who the chair is, whenever they're interviewed, they all just sound like bumbling idiots. Final thing before I set you loose. I've been making the case, Porter has as well, for BYU's inclusion. It just became pretty clear a couple of weeks ago as the numbers started to kind of fall into place and the rankings were released that they were going to have to win on Saturday to get in. Right, yeah. Wrong, or indifferent, that felt like that was the deal. But what does the case for you, Spencer, sound like for BYU's inclusion into the CFP, even with their loss on Saturday?
I think you have to start with the numbers that the committee at one point said mattered the most, which were strength of record, overall win-loss record, and strength of schedule. So, like, what was your win-loss record based on how difficult your schedule was and the results of those wins? Like, going into Saturday's game, BYU had the number 6 strength of record and were 8 spots higher than Notre Dame in strength of schedule. It was 34 and 42, I believe. And they had a better strength of schedule and a better strength of record and a better win-loss record than Miami did as well. Like, those are my two biggest issues. We're like Alabama, whatever, going in, they had beaten Georgia on the road. That might be one of the best wins, if not the best win in the regular season of any team in college football this season. Indiana winning at Oregon has a debate for that too. But my gosh, BYU head-to-head with Notre Dame and Miami, it was just so heavy on, okay, let's compare Notre Dame and Miami and the head-to-head, blah, blah, blah. BYU wasn't even included in the conversation, but they had the better resume. And you see guys like Stanford Steve and Scott Van Pelt coming out today and saying, gosh, we're looking at BYU's resume, and, they had a better resume, clearly, than Notre Dame and Miami. And I'm like, yes, where were you guys, 2 weeks ago? Yes, you're seeing what I'm talking about. So it starts there. Just what's your win-loss record? How tough is your schedule compared to what everybody else did? And what do those wins mean? And BYU's resume was just clearly the body of work was, by the numbers, was better than those two teams. But they lost out to eye test and game control. Well, they didn't beat teams by as many points as Notre Dame did. Okay, but Notre Dame didn't play as tough of a schedule, and they didn't win one of their two most important games. What are we doing here? So that's kind of how I would sum all that up.
Yeah, again, good season for BYU, more good than bad, just like Utah, but with the nature of this sport changing the way it has, everyone just wanting a little bit more, buddy. I appreciate your time. Have a good week. We'll do it again soon, okay?
Always good to talk to you guys. Be well, and happy holidays.
All right, there he is, Spencer Litton from BYU TV. We will catch a break. We saw Bill Bush and Ted Robinson, a lot more college football on the way on a Monday edition of The Drive. Show rolling along today, and always fun. We can catch up with my buddy Jeff Robe from My Hearing Centers. Hello, Jeff. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Thanks, Spence.
I want to start right here. I think a lot of people, when they hear, potentially we're going to, talk to them about hearing aids, well, maybe they think they're too young. Hearing aids potentially for people's understandings for older folk, but that's not necessarily the case, Jeff. When is the best time to look to get hearing aids?
Well, hearing loss can happen really any time in life, and we're finding that younger and younger people are exposed to loud noise, or they might have a medication that they take that might be causing a hearing problem, or it could be due to illness, or it might even be genetics. So if somebody thinks that they have a hearing loss, they're maybe not hearing things as clearly as they used to, or words are sounding a little muffled or not crisp sounding, they're missing certain sounds, we want them to give us a call, because you want to take care of it as soon as you possibly can. Today is the day to get it fixed and to get something done, because you don't want to wait.
Why should our listeners, Jeff, choose you guys over at My Hearing Centers?
Well, one of the things is we've got some great people. They're trained and licensed in hearing health care. They are experienced in helping people find a solution that works specifically for them. Hearing is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Each person is different, and we have to make sure that we've got a really good test so that we know what their specific hearing loss is. And then what our folks will do is they will tailor a solution to meet the individual needs and the preferences of each patient, and they're very skilled at doing that.
So let's talk about this actual product. I think a lot of listeners, when they hear hearing aids, they maybe think of their grandpa wearing two big old bananas on the back of his ears. This is a much different product. Jeff, tell us about the Signia BCTIX.
Well, the BCTIX actually is the smallest Bluetooth connectable hearing device on the market right now. So it's not easily seen by others. Folks might not even know that you're wearing them. They're so small. And the technology that they have built into them is just amazing. You can use an app to adjust the volume, to adjust the noisy environment. If you're in a noisy environment, you can have the hearing aids actually detect speech and make it more prominent above the background noise, so it'll be easier for you to hear. So there's some amazing technology that's built into these.
All right, Jeff, before we set you loose, we got a special offer for listeners. Let's hear about it.
We're looking for 50 ESPN listeners with problems hearing to take part in a 30-day challenge to evaluate this new Signia BCTIX. We want them to call 701-1924 and schedule an appointment today or book your appointment online at myhearingcenters.com.
Guys, with the holidays just around the corner, let's not miss out on all the sounds and wonderful holiday gatherings. Do something about it today to start down the path to better hearing. Here's the phone number. It's 801-701-1924, 801-701-1924, 801-701-1924, or online at myhearingcenters.com. Jeff, thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Tonight, it will be Special thank you to Spencer Linton from BYU TV, good buddy of ours, about 40 miles down south, talking some college football. College football playoff bowl destinations for Utah and BYU. And shout out to the Aggies. Shout out to Utah State going bowling year one under Bronco Mendenhall. We will bring in Bill Bush today, national championship college football coach with LSU's, coached locally as well. Notre Dame alum Ted Robinson is going to stop by as well. I would imagine Ted is among the Notre Dame folk that aren't too thrilled with what's going on right now. So more football later on. Porter, I want to bring you into something I asked Scott. Scott Mitchell joined us today. And it seems like most every year, I mean, there's some years that you just kind of, like last year, you know, for a Utah football fan, it certainly was frustrating. But most years you can kind of identify it with like a moment, a narrative, a storyline, a game, a banner, a championship. Utah football 2025 will be remembered how?
That is a really good question. I think that's I want to say TBD, even though it's just a Vegas Bowl, right? Because I think a lot of people are still waiting on Kyle Whittingham, Morgan Scalley, what this really means as far as Utah football. If this isn't the end and this is just another 10-2 season, then I don't know that it is a season you look at with any sort of major significance. And I think, unfortunately, the main point that you're probably going to look at is a loss to BYU that you really think you could have had, that if you did, you're probably playing in the top 12 and in the college football playoff. Probably. Now, we look at the Big 12, we look at how that all played out, but a one-loss Utah team, I think, would be pretty tough. And I think the committee told us that with how they ranked Utah early on, that they just had to handle their business there or win the Big 12, and they didn't. And I think that might be really what people look back and look at this team as, is really damn good. As good as Utah's been in, of course, this Big 12 era, just not quite good enough.
Yeah, as the season unfolded and we started to really move from our observation college football phase into our conclusion college football phase, like what do we know about Utah? What do we know about the Big 12? What do we know about BYU? It just became very clear, I think after 7 weeks or so, 6 or 7 weeks, that this was a top-heavy conference with three very good football teams. And then beyond that, I don't even know if anybody's good. I mean, Houston, Arizona, they finish in the top 25 at the end of the day, so give them credit for winning 9 games. I mean, winning 9 games at a lot of places is an absolute wonderful accomplishment. Winning 9 games will get you extensions as a head football coach in the P4. But it started to become pretty clear that there were 3 very good teams, and then the rest were just hard to kind of analyze week to week. And those teams were obviously Texas Tech, CFP bound with a top 4 seed and a bye on their way. Brigham Young losing in the Big 12 championship game, and then Utah was that other team. I think Scott hit a good dynamic, though. So I do agree with you, and it's why we covered the BYU game the way that we did, because it appeared that whoever won that game was going to have the inside track to probably play Tech in the Big 12 championship game. Utah already got earlier by said Texas Tech team, so the margin for Utah was smaller. But if they were able to beat BYU, I was pretty confident in the rest of the schedule as far as their ability to win the games, which they did. They won their final 5 games. Oftentimes, they're trouncing teams. Certainly offensively, after the BYU loss, you know, the running game just flew to the top of the Big 12 standings and one of the top 3 or 4 in the country. You hang 53 on Colorado, 45 on Cincinnati, 55 on Baylor, 51 on K-State, and then 31 on Kansas to end the season. But that BYU game will be one that goes down in history, not just because you lose to your rival, but it is what it cost you. And we kind of had that feeling leading up to the game. It's why it felt like it was one of the biggest rivalry games in the history of the 103-year back and forth between Utah and BYU. And it wasn't just that they lost, it was the way that they lost. Then we'll look back on that game as the decisions to go forward on 4th down. That will be the 4th down decision game. Most Utah BYU games, you always have one phrase, one name. Beck to Harline, right? 4th and 18, Brandon Burton block. The Scott Mitchell 1988 game. Last year was probably the Mark Harlan game, the most memorable moment outside of the penalty that Ute fans weren't thrilled about and the ability of Jake Retzlaff and Chase Roberts to connect and ultimately win. This year's Utah BYU game does feel like it will go down as the fourth down decision game. But I think Scott's comments, like if we move it over to a positive side, there were very loud critics and a lot of skeptical people waiting to see what Jason Beck would do as a play caller and waiting to see what Devin Dampier would do as a quarterback in P4. If there's a positive takeaway, Porter, I think it has to be that. I think you found your offensive coordinator, and hopefully you can retain your quarterback and build on a really good year for those two.
Well, and just the overarching feeling around this program that the last couple of years was an outlier, right? Just understanding that that's more what happened when you're living in it, right? When you're right in the middle of wondering if Cam Rising's going to play or if you're going to win enough games to be bowl eligible. It's hard to have much perspective, but now after a 10-win season, after not only a 10-win season, but a 10-win season in which, as we've talked about, if you performed up to your level for just 15 more minutes, you're talking about some really lofty goals. I think that is another, I guess, benefit to what Utah fans will look at this is hey, that was a moment in time. This is still what we are. I think that means something to them.
Yeah, and good point, and a really important one to hone in on as well, because there was, I feel like, certainly when it came to feedback I would receive from friends of mine that are Utah football season ticket holders and boosters, or even, just things that go around on social, I do think there was a little bit of a fear that the proof of concept that Witt has earned for 2 decades might have to be adjusted. And what does that look like in the modern day of college football? Can you still live off of 2- and 3-star recruits that you develop over 3, 4, 5 years sometimes, and send them on to the NFL and win conference championships or qualify for cool bowl games and good opportunities? That was really, and still is in a way. I mean, I'm not saying that you do away with this entirely, but the entire lifeblood of Utah football was Witt's ability to identify under-recruited players, convince them to come to Utah, and then work with them over a number of different years to turn them into pros. Oftentimes switching positions when players entered the program as a wide receiver like Nate Orchard. No, you're a defensive end. We could go, we always do this. The list is very, very long of talented players identified by this coaching staff, switching positions and ultimately thriving. And not just thriving as college athletes, oftentimes thriving as pros. So last year, well, in the past 2 years, even though 2 years ago winning 8 games with that injured roster was one of Kyle's best jobs, in my opinion. But last year, it didn't look good. The depth wasn't there. The contingencies weren't in place when Cameron couldn't stay healthy. It was clear that Isaac just simply wasn't ready. I don't know what the future for him holds, by the way. And so this year, to loudly answer those critics, to loudly answer the people in the community that were questioning whether or not the game had passed Witt by, questioning whether or not his approach could work in the modern day and age of college football, I think those questions were answered this year. And that might be the main takeaway. And the other questions that not only were answered this year, but answered last week during the recruiting cycle is whether or not Utah can keep up in the world of NIL, where you simply have to spend. And look, spending on the level of Texas Tech and now probably BYU with the new promises Kalani received as far as what the NIL coffers look like, it's going to be a tough ask for Utah to hang with the top, 5, 10 programs in the country year after year monetarily with the economic model. But you hear these rumors about the athletic department potentially being in debt, and what does that mean for the future of the program? But to hear Ben Moa go on Sean's show last week, and I'll continue to harp on this example because the Celestia Moa example to me is the best one. It'd be one thing if Celestia was transferring from or flipping his commit from Utah State to Utah or Idaho, a smaller type school or one that's kind of akin. Celestia flipped his commit from Tennessee, who has one of the top 10 recruiting classes in the country, which means their pockets are full. And flipping from Tennessee to Utah and then having Ben go on Sean's show and say, yes, Utah can hang in the NIL space with anybody in the country. I feel like that was probably, at least in my opinion, the biggest takeaway I had from the recruiting cycle last week.
Yeah, when again, back to that point I made, when it's not a moment in time and when you're seeing that continue to look like you're moving in the right direction, in a positive direction, and you're winning 10 games during the course of a football season, I think that's just a huge positive. There was a lot of, I don't want to say fear, I think you said consternation, right? Just some concern for Utah fans that maybe they've lost a little bit of an edge. And we saw one of the more physical football teams in the country, and we saw them come out and run the football like we're used to seeing Utah football do so. And they brought in a bunch of good recruits that watched them do that throughout the season. So, I think that's a major plus. And now you have a bowl game to look forward to. Consider it a celebration, if nothing else, of a return to what you expect of Utah football.
Yeah, I mean, based off of proximity, Vegas is a destination. A lot of people enjoy it. I'm not a huge Vegas guy myself, but it's close by. You can drive if you want. It's a really quick, cheap flight. Nebraska's a fine opponent. It's a mid-table Big Ten team. Utah is a 14-point favorite to open up the sportsbook lines, and there are a few sportsbooks that have not put anything on the game just yet. You wait till the game is a little bit closer. How many players are going to show up? Are the guys that are preparing for the draft even going to make the trip? So it's hard to know what it's going to look like. A guy like Spencer Fano, I think you probably pat him on the helmet and say, thanks, buddy, but you go make sure you're ready for the biggest night of your life when your life will change during the NFL draft. No word on Caleb yet, Caleb Lomu, hoping that he'll come back and be the anchor for this offensive line. But it's hard to know exactly what the bowl game is going to look like. And as we've talked about all day, the sad part about the way the sport has changed is, what does it even really mean outside of, to Porter's point, maybe one last chance to celebrate the football team, one last chance for these young men to practice together, to prepare together, and then go to battle together. The dynamic of not playing doesn't resonate with me at all, unless you are going to be like a first-round pick. That's the only thing that makes sense. And honestly, even then, I can only speak for myself. I think I'd want to play. Like, you know what I mean? Like, one more opportunity.
I'm with you.
Ultimately, when any of us that played on any level and wanted to keep playing, the first year you weren't doing that, it was a life adjustment. And one more opportunity to do that with your friends, I don't know. Even if I understand why you would do it. If you're Spencer Fano, I think part of me would really want one more opportunity to play with my teammates.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I've spent a lot of time, worked with our guy Skyler in kind of that space, right? Where these guys are, should I start preparing for a combine, a draft, or should I play in a bowl game? And, not that I'm one to give advice, because as I don't, have any experience being a NFL draft prospect. But when those guys kind of are unsure of what to do, I say, fast forward 5 years. Just fast forward 5 years. Regardless of where you're at, will you regret not playing in that game? Regardless of the money in your bank account, will you regret not playing in that game? Now, maybe, but in certain players' cases, that regret is outweighed by what could be millions and millions of dollars. That's not a very usual thing, right? Like, a couple players in the country can have that excuse, in my estimation. The rest of them, I think, go play that game. You're not making money by sitting it out and thinking you're going to rise up the draft boards. Or again, the injury is one thing, but that was the case last week when you played in a conference title game, or the week before when you're playing regular season football.
Yeah. And, the other dynamic, and we've only heard, I think, of one player from Utah officially announcing his intent to enter the transfer portal. The transfer portal opens on January 2nd. So at this point, the reason to announce the intent is to just prepare people. If anybody wants to make you an offer, attaching the phone number of your agent to your social media post for a college kid is a pretty wild thing. It's different, and we certainly have been kind of programmed in a way based off of lobbyists using propaganda to convince us that this sport has always been something that it never has been. which is the sanctity of amateurism as I'm rolling my eyes and caring about the student athlete. I'm an adult. I get it. This is a front-facing, revenue-generating product and business, and it's in business to, be in business. But certainly there always felt like there was something a little more pure about this sport as it pertains to comparing it to the NFL. And the reality is it never has been. We were just kind of convinced of it. And so I think that's another element that comes into play when it comes to the visceral reaction of college football fans when players from their favorite team actually do decide to transfer. You see a lot of hate. You see a lot of people really, really angry. I think the Keanu Tanavasa situation here locally was an example of that. Felt bad for Keanu. Joined us during Big 12 media days, and he was shaken. You could tell that was hard on him. And I get the hurt because he's really, really good. But if the reports are true and he was able to go make that type of money before playing pro football, you kind of just – again, give them a hug, say thanks for the memories and good luck. Yeah, we want to beat you when we play you. But we're just not really still, even 4 or 5 years into this thing, we're still not used to it. It still feels new. It still feels weird that year after year, the college football community essentially has to get to know another group of players, as opposed to seeing guys stick around for 3, 4, 5 years when you know them. They're around. They're in the city. They're, obviously not just playing, but they're part of the community in a way that isn't just the reality now. And it's also so interesting to understand how certain dynamics can just come out of nowhere and either benefit you or detract from you. Like Troy Taylor getting fired from Stanford changed the Big 12 this year because Texas Tech grabbed the David Bailey kid and BYU grabbed Bear Bachmeier. Like Troy keeps his job. Those players aren't available. And it changes the whole landscape of the entire conference. It's wild how these unknown things can actually manifest and then change the entire thing. So for Utah football, it is a trip to the Vegas Bowl. It is a matchup against Nebraska. And then, you got to hit the ground running when it comes to retaining your talent and then adding to via the transfer portal after a solid recruiting class was signed last week. When the dust settled, Utah was ranked, this is according to Rivals, 247, and ESPN might have it different. Utah locks in the 8th ranked recruiting class in the Big 12, so pretty much mid-table. It settled like this. West Virginia actually ended up ranked ahead of Texas Tech. They signed 49 players because they were atrocious this year. Texas Tech brings in 20 players. Their composite, 88.9. BYU third. They're bringing 22 players, 88.7. And then Arizona State, TCU, Houston, Arizona, and Utah. With the Pula brothers committing to BYU, that dropped Utah's ranking both in the Big 12 and nationally a couple of different spots. So only time will tell. All right. Before we catch a break, who likes money? Porter, you like money, don't you?
Don't you know it?
Okay, thank you. Porter is a fan of money, and so are all of you. Raise your hand if you're in the car, if you like money. Our friends at America First Credit Union can help you have your money work for you. Let's have your money do more for you. If you're in business with a national bank, a big national chain, or even some of the local well-known chains, the bad news is they're not helping you make money. They're in it so they could profit. They're profiting off of you. That's just how it works. The reason a credit union is a better spot for your money is it's a different model. It is not for profit. They're actually in business to help you make money, believe it or not. That's just the deal. And America First Credit Union is the official credit union of the University of Utah Athletic Department, Real Salt Lake, and the Utah Jazz. You get early entrance to Rice-Eccles Stadium, America First Field, or the Delta Center. By the way, it's called the Delta Center, if we can start growing up with that. You can get early entrance to all the venues. You get a bunch of discounts on food and bev and merch. So there's that. If you're a sports fan, you can design your debit card. You can have like a Jazz card, a Ute card, RSL card as well. But ultimately, they've got a great new member offer. Like, you should make the switch even without this offer just because it will help your money work for you. But they're giving you $100 if you just open up a checkings and a savings account. No strings attached. They're just hooking you up with $100. And then it's never too early to teach your children about how money works. America First Credit Union has a $50 offer for teens. So you open up an account for your teen. They're going to throw $50 in there, and then they're going to help you kind of learn how you can teach your children to have a good head start in life when it comes to managing their money. So America First Credit Union, 87 branches in Utah. It feels like there's a branch like every 3 or 4 blocks. You can also go to americafirst.com/deals for all the information. That's our good friends at America First Credit Union. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. 4 o'clock hour, two really good college football guests. It's Bill Bush and it's Ted Robinson. Alex Jensen Coaches Show. When we say goodnight, we'll join Monday Night Football in progress. Keep it here on ESPN 700. Eagles-Chargers tonight. Monday Night Football, final game of the football slate for the weekend in pro football. It's at SoFi. It's a big one for both teams, so we'll get to some NFL storylines later on. Alex Jensen coaches show tonight. Talk some Utah basketball. The Utes know their bowl destination. The CFP is set. Our next guest won a national championship as a college coach. Coached around here for a while. It's always fun to catch up with Bill Bush on a Monday. Coach, happy Monday, sir. How are you?
Doing great, per usual. Great to be invited back on the show. You guys do a tremendous job, and just love talking about the Utes and everything that's going on in college football right now.
Well, I appreciate your time. Let's start with an unfortunate day for BYU, but a culmination of an excellent season for Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game down in Arlington. It was Tech 34, BYU 7. Cougars get off to a really solid start. Then ultimately Tech did to them what they do to most teams. That's just a really good team, Coach, wouldn't you say?
That's a really good team, and it's kind of crazy how the game ended up, but those things happen. I mean, at one point in time, if I'm correct, it's 13-7, and BYU has the ball.
Correct.
But 4 minutes to go in the third quarter. I mean, so I'm like, oh, this can't be a better scenario. Honestly, it's like it's playing out exactly how you want to have it played out, and then obviously things, turn from there. But still an incredible job. And you just stop and say, I mean, Tech right now is the fourth-rated team in the country, and BYU lost to them twice. That's their only 2 losses. And so that's a job well done. It's always going to be a letdown because you were so close when you had the opportunity. But that's what BYU had. They had an opportunity. If they win the game, they're in. And so that's all you can ask for as a coach.
Since you and I last spoke, a really interesting news cycle taking place out this way. And I don't know that I ever thought Kalani was going to leave, Coach, but Penn State is an elite college football job. And generational wealth is generational wealth. BYU, with some very charitable donations, it sounds like, able to step up to the plate, retain Kalani. We're hearing that very nice raises are involved for Jay Hill and Aaron Roderick, and there's some NIL guarantees now at BYU that weren't there prior to. So as a guy that coached, you know the business. Just how big of a job is Penn State football? Kind of give us some perspective there, and then your thoughts on Kalani saying no to the Nittany Lions and saying yes to stay here to coach BYU.
Well, a couple things. Penn State's a monster. It's a national monster. The attention it has, the difficulty in the job. I mean, if you just take stuff, what kind of a monster is it? Well, just look at the coach they fired, week 4, and the success he had. And also he was hired back immediately in another Power 4 conference. And so that's what tells you how difficult it is. But they do have resources, and they do have a niche in the area of the country in which they reside. So they have a lot of good things going for it. And so it's an incredible place. They started off, besides the error the throwing error that was made last year in the semifinals, it appeared as if they were going to the national championship game. And they threw the interception late against Notre Dame. And then to turn around, and I think preseason number 2 in the country with everyone returning and things fell apart. So it does tell you it's like you can get to a lot of great places there, and the expectations are extremely high. That's for sure. And then with Kalani, like I said, this is me from a distance, was that I'm sure there was why would there not be a reason to discuss, to look at it, because Kalani has the skill set to be successful there. Myself personally, I didn't think it would ever. I just thought, I don't know if you can get anybody that's more BYU than Kalani is, just for playing for Lavelle and what he's doing right there. But I also would have said that about my good friend Bronco Mendenhall, that he would never leave BYU, and he did. So it was on the table. I just didn't really feel that it would happen, but I'm glad things went very well for him as far as him and his staff and NIL and all those things that go with it.
As you know, your buddy Bronco went on to UVA, where he was paid, much better than he was at BYU. And BYU, historically speaking, has elected to not pay their football or basketball coaches on par with their peers. I mean, Lavelle had a really cool opportunity for a while to do some radio with Lavelle Edwards and Coach Mack before Lavelle passed, and famously told the story of never really having a contract negotiation, never being really interested in looking for raises and had an opportunity to go coach the Lions, just wanted to coach BYU. They've now changed that, Coach. They're paying Kevin Young and Kalani not just on par. The reports are Kalani's now the second highest paid coach in the Big 12, Dion being one, and Kevin Young among the highest paid basketball coaches in the conference as well. What do you make of this shift in philosophy, and do you feel like it's simply just necessary to continue the momentum they have going on down there?
Well, it is necessary. You can just take a look at who the champion is in the Big 12.
Yep.
And obviously they're a heavily invested team, and it shows up on the field. It shows up how their coaches are taking care of all those things. And BYU is very smart because the one thing you learn is, obviously your front porch of your university is your athletics, and the better that looks, that allows you to be able to recruit better students to your school. It creates more attention. All the different things that you want to have happen, the front porch means a lot to you. And so it's a great job by them, by BYU administration, seeing that. And then also, I never felt at any point in time that Kalani was, out there petitioning for himself for another job. And I would bet, and I don't know this for sure, even though I have a lot of friends on staff, I would bet that this was brought more by Penn State than it was Kalani trying to promote himself, to get himself to be in this spot. And I think a raise just happened with it. So when great people, great humans have good things happen to them, I'm very excited for it. And that's what Kalani is, just a great person. And in this profession, it's rough. And so it's great to see the good guys win.
So you referenced Kalani and his style, feeling like he could really execute it anywhere. This is a hypothetical conversation, and it's irrelevant because he stayed at BYU. But a lot of the jobs that have been linked to Kalani, I've just wondered whether or not his approach or his style would actually work there. The marriage between Penn State and Kalani, what do you think attracted him to them? And do you believe that with what he's shown here, he could actually go to a blue blood program like Penn State and see success?
A couple things with it. I always just feel the same way in recruiting. So we'll talk about we need to have this person because they recruit this area and the different things that happen. And I don't believe in any of that. You can either recruit or you can't, and you can either connect or you can't. And so Nick Saban's not from Alabama, and he went into the southeast part of the country and did great. And it wasn't like, well, everyone's always great at Alabama. That's not true. He came in because they just fired their coach. So if you have the ability and the skill set to connect the coach, to develop, and then to obviously be a completely honest soul like Kalani is, the chance of him being successful is unbelievable. And I'm sure that's exactly what Penn State saw. They're like, hang on a second here. No one's talking to Kalani because it's, he's of the Mormon faith and BYU and he won't leave there. Why shouldn't we talk to him? Look at his success, his ability to connect with the players, all those things. So I just think 100% that there's those that can coach, those that can connect, those that can recruit, and they can do it any place in the country. I know when I was at Utah, I recruited American Samoa. I'm from small town Nebraska. So there wasn't a big carryover between the two. And so you just figure it out. And some guys can figure it out. And Kalani would have that ability. And he would be extremely accepted so fast because they would see how genuine he is. And then the genuine's great, but he also has the level of knowledge that goes with it from being a on the field very, very successful defensive coordinator and understands football well. So he has the background of knowledge and then the ability to connect at a very high level.
I'm going to ask you to solve an issue, Coach. I'm going to ask you to fix the college football coaching carousel, or at least help me come up with an idea, because BYU was able to keep their head coach. Ole Miss was not. And look, I don't begrudge anybody Lane Kiffin himself said the LSU job, and you would know this because you coached there, is the best job in America. And a lot of people for quite some time have surmised that was Lane's dream job. Kind of like when Urban was here, everyone knew at some point he wanted Ohio State. I think there was some Notre Dame conversation. So this is not an anti-Lane Kiffin rant. I'm just saying I feel bad for the kids. because they're playing for a college football national championship, qualifying for the CFP. It just feels like, I don't know what can be put in place, but something should be there to say you can't engage with other programs if you're still in the mix to win a national championship. Now, you can never do this in the pros. You can never say, okay, you got to coach the Raiders till the end of the year, Pete Carroll. Sorry, even if it's hard. But give me your thoughts on this as a former college coach and whether or not it feels fair to these players who are still in action.
Well, it's not fair. A couple things is like with Ole Miss, they're in the playoffs and they're talented enough to win it. They could win it all. It's not one of those where, well, they're in, but they're out first round. Not true.
Yeah,
they have that type of ability, so that's what makes it even more difficult than like, well, this is such a stretch. So it's bizarre. So I do have a strong feeling on it, and it's however you want to do it with the calendar. My big push was where everything gets so out of whack is because of the semester. That's where everything goes off. Like, well, we have to get someone in because the new semester is starting. And because the semester, that's how they set the transfer portal on the date. Well, we have to have that prior to, because guys have to be able to get into school at the new semester. And so if you don't find a way to change the calendar, in my opinion, it's real simple. You have to change, either you have to move everything up, which means you start football in August, in early August, I'm saying, not late August. So then this doesn't happen. So there's no one talking to anybody until the season's over, or you have to just eliminate the semester part. And one of the things that I brought up on a different show was I suggested that with the semester, that if someone's transferring, they get a semester waiver of not being in school, which means they wouldn't have, that you could move the transfer portal and everything back a different time. That might be a little bit of a stretch, but the bottom line is that you have to be able to say that the calendar is different, but the semester is what screws everything up. And I know there's some that are on different ones, but 98% of the schools are on semesters, and that's where it gets all jacked. That's why you hear about when the signing date is and the transfer portal, and all these things are all set up so that everyone is ready to go on basically January 15th or 20. You can usually, most of the time in semester schools, you can get someone into school until the mid-20s, like January 24th or something. So everyone's like, we got to have everybody here by that time. If you don't blow that up, this will never end. But you also have to take everything in the history of the sport and the time frame and the calendar. You have to blow it all up. That's the only chance you have, because the NFL has it figured out. Like you said, so good. Nothing happens till it's over. When's the draft? When is the combine? When everything's set up, there's no cross. This never happens because they don't have the weird stoppage, and they're not trying to obtain new players and transfers while this, within a day of the season being over. That would be like in the NFL, after the day after the Super Bowl is the draft, and they just have it figured out better. But if you don't eliminate the semester part, you won't win.
The transactional nature of the sport now, Coach, I think we're still adjusting. I just don't think we're used to it. I mean, ultimately, players being paid, oftentimes in the past under the table, we never heard about it. We never knew about it. Just heard rumors of impropriety happening and, players transferring schools. That's also not a brand new dynamic. But as we approach bowl season, it feels like a lot of the teams that aren't playing for a national championship, a lot of them are just tapping out of the bowl experience altogether. Notre Dame was set to play Brigham Young, had the invite in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and of course they feel like they should be in the 12-team CFP. I'd be interested in your comments on that, but they're not even playing. And then we're going to hear and have already heard of players who will just elect to tap out of the bowl experience altogether. Maybe you're preparing for the draft. Maybe you're just over it. But does the transactional nature of the modern game bother you, or are you used to it and it's just kind of like the way it is now?
There's some things that I'm used to. There's some people that everyone is used to, but no, in that area is very concerning to me and almost in disbelief, because I know when I saw that Kansas State and Iowa State had opted out because of a coaching change. Well, there's been 100 coaching changes, right? And people still played in bowl games. which was very odd because those two programs in the Big 12 are known as being very blue collar. And I know there was a coaching change, and I'm very shocked. And at all places that turned it down, there was 6 or 7 5-7 schools. They make a little bit more sense because they knew they were out of it earlier. But the 3 that had the Notre Dame and Iowa State and Kansas State, the reason I look at it this way is that there has to be players on that team that would love to play. They can say players voted or we're not the same team. You just can't tell me if you're the 5th wide receiver and you're a senior that you don't want to go play, because this is it. So some people's careers just ended with, oh, okay, I guess that's it. We voted in the meeting room that we're done. So turn your stuff in and career's over. And so that part to me is I don't think anyone will disagree besides those in that building. Everyone would have to think, well, you have to play the game, get your team together, because the one thing is that the Kansas State and Iowa State, they're going to be playing. They're 6-6, I believe. I'm not sure if Iowa State's 7-5, but I know K-State's 6-6. They'll be playing another 6-6, 7-5 team. They won't be playing. They're not playing Georgia, so it'll be very comparable to what they're playing. Notre Dame is one that's alarming, just because of the same thing, people not having the opportunity to play. How many times have you heard this one? We need those extra 15 practices. It's so important. That's thrown out. That you can't even make that excuse for some people now. It's like, hold it, you had a chance for 15 more practices and you opted out to not do that. And then for Notre Dame, what I heard today just doing some research was that this may cost ESPN somewhere around $30 million, having Notre Dame refusing to play in the game with their TV revenue because of the power of the brand. So imagine that. And I don't know if there's any repercussions. I know that Kansas State and Iowa State both got fined $500,000. But for a coach in old school, no. You qualify for a bowl. You get offered a bowl game. You get your team organized. You get them together, and away you go.
Do you feel like Notre Dame has legitimate beef? Do you think they belong in that 12-team field?
Well, I know this. They're good enough. I think there's two things with it. Is they have a legit beef, but then I'm not going to also at the other end, I'm not going to disagree with why they're not in. The biggest problem occurred was with the committee when they have to do this 6-week interview thing, and forever the committee had them ahead of Miami. And they kept saying, we're not comparing the two. They're not in the same pool. And everyone just kept saying, how can that be with 2 losses? And they have a head-to-head, and it's written in number 2. The number 2 thing that you look at is head-to-head. And then all of a sudden, on the last week, they decided the head-to-head was what made the difference. But prior to the first 5 weeks, it didn't matter. So Notre Dame got themselves believing that 100% they were in, then got the rug pulled out when they really should have been told 5 weeks ago that you're not in because of the head-to-head. Because signature wins, they only have one other one probably, and that's USC. And so, but would you want to play them? Ooh, I don't know. I think they're better than last year. So I agree with that part of it. But I don't know how you could run a committee and have 2 teams be the 10-2 and they played head-to-head and say that didn't matter. So I think everyone's kind of on board with that. I think really the discussion more is on the Alabama side than it is why is Alabama in, more so than one of those two, because that conversation was also very interesting.
I wanted to ask you directly because you coached at the school. Lane Kiffin, LSU, best job in America. I mean, it's certainly in the conversation. Everybody would admit that. But as somebody who coached at the school, do you think he's onto something there?
It's you would never probably win the argument. I don't know how you'd ever have it, but it would. In most cases, when it was all said and done, they'd probably get voted that way. When you look at the fact that you say, okay, the last 3 coaches prior to Brian Kelly all won a national championship with Coach Saban, obviously Les Miles, Coach Orgeron, and then it didn't happen with Brian Kelly. So it has success over that time. They get 108,000 people in there, and it's Death Valley on a Saturday night's the best place that's the number 1 stadium. If you ask anyone, they win that one. That it's the most, daunting stadium that there is. And then they have right there with Georgia, Florida, however you want to look at it. They have the most talent in state with only one Division I school. I mean, with one Power 4 school. So Florida has insane talent. They got Miami, Florida State, and Florida. Different schools have it. Georgia's in a really good spot also. But for that reason, arguably, they have a live tiger. It's pretty cool. So arguably, it's in the mix for being that job. So that part, there'll always be a little bit of pushback, but not much. You only list a few other places that you could say even has a chance.
A couple minutes left, Coach. Let's talk a little Utes. So we've been talking with our guest today about what this season will be known for. 10-2 and 7-2 in conference. It was an awesome year. It was a great year. It was a good bounce back year after the difficulties a year ago and even the year before that. A couple of seasons that certainly, by Whit's own admission, did not meet the standard that he has set for all of us, and we're all very much spoiled because 10-2 is a really good year. A lot of coaches would love a 10-2 season. And so, we've been discussing, of course, the loss to BYU as something we'll all look back on because it felt very heavy in the moment. And ultimately, it did cost Utah a chance to maybe qualify and play for a conference championship. There's the dynamic of the new offensive coordinator, Jason Beck, being a very dynamic play caller, and Devin, Big 12 newcomer of the year. As you look back on this Utah football season, and we will get to the bowl matchup because you're the perfect guy for this question, but before we get there, 10-2, 7-2 in conference, what should we look back on this season with for Utah football?
I'm still an old school, complete, body of work. And when you go 10-2, that's a great year. It just is. And then you had a disappointment. Obviously, it's the 10-2 is a little different. If they being the Utes were 10-2, but they beat BYU and lost someplace else, it probably feels even a little better, even though the BYU, the team they lost to, is really good. As you know, that game is, there's only a few out there. Ohio State, Michigan is one of those. Texas A&M, now that they're playing again, is one. There's only a few out there where I've lost that game and I've won that game. It's the most gut-wrenching, there is from a fan base and from a coaching staff and from players. So that makes it very hard because of that loss is to BYU. But overall, I'm always a big picture scheme, and I'm like 10-2. They had a lot of big wins. They had a lot of outstanding play. The Kansas State game was kind of an outlier how that played out, but still found a way to come back and win the game. So I'm still double thumbs up on a great season and so close, obviously.
As I referenced, you're the guy to teach us about Nebraska, Matt Rule's team, and it'll be Utah-Nebraska in the Vegas Bowl on New Year's Eve. Utah is an early 14-point favorite. A lot has to transpire between now and then. I don't even know what the two teams are going to look like. I know they made a change on the defensive coordinator side of things. They had a middling season in the Big Ten. Coach Rule was connected to a lot of openings, but he elected to stay. So tell us about Nebraska. What is Utah up against come New Year's Eve?
Well, a couple things. One, obviously, I still live here in the state, so I enjoy that. So I do follow them. I'm not a Nebraska insider because I never go to practice, so I don't see them. So I follow them kind of like a fan does. Couple things you'll see is you'll see a very interested crowd, which means that Nebraska fans will show up. There will be a lot of people traveling to this game. For the reason is there's a ton of Nebraskans in California and there's a ton in Arizona. So they can drive. And they went to UCLA about 4 weeks ago and literally put 20-some thousand people in the Rose Bowl. And so there'll be a big crowd for that. There was an injury at quarterback. Now we're starting a true freshman who had a fabulous game against UCLA, struggled in the last game against Iowa, and but now he's back in elements of playing indoors. So I think that's a huge advantage for him. I think the thing that comes down on any of these bowl games is it happens. You see it every year. Is like who's interested? Who's the most interested in playing in this game? And so that's kind of a question for you also on where Utah's at. I know Nebraska will be very interested. The loss of right now is that with the running back with Emmett Johnson not playing and against Iowa, I think he was 80% of their offense. He's a first-team All Big Ten. He's the Big Ten running back of the year. So that's a big loss. They have an offensive lineman, Rocco Spindler, who is out with a surgery. But other than that, I think that'll be about it. Might be a player here and there. So they'll be a pretty invested team. I think Coach Rule will do a great job of having his guys excited to play, and they did a great job because that's a great bowl game in my opinion. You know, I mean, we beat when I was at Utah, we beat USC in the Vegas Bowl, and that was on Christmas Day out at the old stadium. So this bowl game has picked up a lot. So I think they'll have Nebraska be fully invested, but the loss of the running back will be major. And then they struggled with the reason there's a change on defense. But the reason they really made the change was the defending the run was extremely difficult for them. And so that's my question to you: is where is Utah at right now with players, and is there any opt-outs? Because I know the matchup of the Utah's incredible offensive line against Nebraska's defensive line, which has struggled, which has been out there. It's not any news to anyone. Would have been a major advantage probably for Utah in that spot.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything official. There was a young backup linebacker who just announced his intent to enter the transfer portal. Spencer Fano might be a top 10 pick, and I don't think anybody would begrudge him sitting out preparing for the draft. But as of now, I feel like Utah might have its full complement.
Yeah, and then and I would be shocked if they didn't have as many as possible, and that's really comes from one spot. That's head coach down.
Yeah,
it really is. It's the head coach. Kyle will have great culture. He also is smart enough to listen if someone has, like you mentioned, a top 10 pick of okay, what does this mean? What does this do? He'll be very understanding and be able to listen. But like I said, it'll be a great a great situation for both teams to play in, because the Utah fans will travel to Vegas. And so I think it's going to be a fun game and to build understand. But the matchup right now that stands out the most is Utah's offensive line against Nebraska's defensive line. Offensive line.
For sure, yeah.
I'm all screwed up there.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, it should be a fun one. Looking forward to it. And appreciate your time, Coach. Always great insight. Be well, and we'll chat soon, okay?
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Go Utes.
All right, Bill Bush, national championship coach with LSU, coach here at Utah. Knows the landscape, coach with Bronco. They're good buddies. So always appreciate Bill's insight when he can join the program. We'll do more college football. I'm anticipating – now, Ted Robinson's the nicest guy in the world, but he's a Notre Dame alum. I have a feeling he might be in his feelings. We're going to bring in Ted coming up. Don't forget Alex Jensen coaches show. When we say goodnight, we'll join Monday Night Football in progress. Busy show, rest of the way. Monday Drive. Keep it here. ESPN 700. Your week of pro football, weekend of pro football ends tonight. Eagles, Chargers, Monday Night Football. We're going to do the Alex Jensen Coaches Show when we say goodnight in about an hour and 20 minutes from now, and then we'll join Monday Night Football in progress. The college football playoff bracket is set, and I bring in our next guest, and I feel for him. Uncle Ted Robinson, how are you, sir?
Hey, Spence. Well, look, I'm probably in the same mindset as many college football fans around the country in that we really shouldn't be surprised because the sport is a mess right now. We've known that. People didn't know it. So why would we expect anything different from this playoff committee? It was a mess.
Yeah, and it just continues to be a situation where the goalposts move every year and sometimes every week. But when it comes to Notre Dame specifically, when I saw you were on the rundown, it's like, all right, we're going to get a take from somebody who's close to the situation. They had a chance to go down to the Pop-Tarts Bowl to play BYU. They have declined to do that. But what's the conversation sound like with you and, the group of Notre Dame alums that clearly right now feel like they got robbed?
Which is like my entire family.
Right.
Yes. And I'm actually, I know some people in my family may disagree, but I'm definitely on the calmer side of this because it's been my profession for so long.
Yeah.
So you have to have some attempt at being professionally detached. But look, in my view, simple, leaving Notre Dame out is indefensible. And I'm not saying that at the expense of any other school. It's just, They played two games. They lost by 3 points in the first week of the season, and they lost on a botched extra point in the second game of the season. And then they not just beat everybody else, they steamrolled. So there's just no defense for leaving them out. We can all see the obvious reasons why it happened. But ultimately, Notre Dame, I think, pays a price and long has for being independent. And this is it. And there is a large portion of college football hierarchy, administrators, and coaches that don't like Notre Dame for being independent. And they'll just use anything they can as a lever against that. And again, I've heard it said by multiple people, some of whom I would place in the category of knuckleheads over the last 24 hours, saying, the Notre Dame deserves us, just join a conference. Well, why? Well, why is it a birthright that every school has to be in a conference? Notre Dame has been able to be independent, and there's pluses and minuses to that, and they've been willing to live with it. I personally wish Notre Dame had joined a conference 25 years ago when the Big Ten opened the door. That was my view. I was in a minority amongst Notre Dame alums and in a very big minority amongst the Notre Dame administration because they passed on that chance. But I wish they had done it, and I think that's where if Notre Dame, which I doubt will happen, ever changes its stance on conference membership in my lifetime, it would be to join the Big Ten.
And that's, that's actually where I wanted to go next because the scheduling tie is the ACC. But to your point, Notre Dame's been able to make the independent thing work just fine. We had a guest earlier say the estimation ESPN's going to lose like $30 million without Notre Dame in that bowl matchup. But if the Big Ten did make that phone call, do you think it would be reciprocated and very much, interested from Notre Dame's side?
I've often thought no, Spence. And after Jim Delaney opened that door 20 plus years ago, and again, Notre Dame decided no, and it was strictly football independence. That was the deciding, from everything I understand, that was the deciding point. I thought that I would never see it in my lifetime. I don't know if this will change things because Notre Dame is in a different place than it ever has been before, and it has nothing to do with football, but it has everything to do with their entire athletic department. I mean, remember, I was a student when Notre Dame first allowed women to come in. So, we're about 50 years of women at Notre Dame, and finally Notre Dame has a well-rounded, strong women's athletic program. And, of course, has emphasized, other sports, Olympic sports on the men's side as well. And that's the reason, so fans understand, that's the reason why Notre Dame has these alliances. It used to be with the Big East, and now it's with the ACC. It's to have a home for 24 sports. And they agree to play 5 games, football games a year against ACC schools, which honestly, when the ACC school is the visiting team at Notre Dame. That's a pretty healthy check that the ACC school gets out of the Notre Dame TV contract. So there's been pluses for both sides. But if Notre Dame, back to your question, were to ever think about joining a conference, it would have to include football. Clearly, no one's going to invite them anymore to be, a part, just to come in with everything except football. That won't happen. It would, to me, the only one that makes sense is the Big Ten. And here's the linchpin, which I do believe in my heart. There's another school that no one talks about right now that's sitting back wondering if the fallout of this decision, and Notre Dame's athletic director, Pete Bavacqua, coming out this morning and being very strong in his comments about the ACC's championing of Miami and slamming of Notre Dame. The school that's standing by watching this is Stanford, because Stanford understands that its position in the ACC is not a long-term play. There's no sustainability. Stanford would very much love Notre Dame to accept a phone call from the Big Ten, and then Stanford would be the second team to go. I think there are a lot of people at Stanford that have long thought that's the escape hatch out of the present mess they're in, is if Notre Dame were to ever say yes to the Big Ten, which means the Big Ten has to ask first. But if that happens, Stanford could join.
Interesting. And, of course, they find themselves, Stanford does, in this pivot, couple-year period with Andrew Luck now taking over as the general manager and Frank Reich on for 1 year. And, look, I think it's a general consensus that Andrew Luck's a very intelligent, well-thought person. And at some point you figure out, you just figure that they're going to get it figured out. But what's your take on their current situation, and how do they find their way out of something that's felt a little rough since, the David Shaw, kind of the peak of David Shaw's years?
So, Spencer, you're just asking about football?
Yeah, mostly. But if
right.
but if you can include the other sports as well. Okay. I mean, it's a conversation about joining the Big Ten.
Okay. So the football scenario is rough because Stanford has no history of sustained football success ever, except for the Harbaugh into David Shaw. And it was mostly David Shaw's years. I mean, that's never happened in the history of Stanford. And it, of course, creates expectation that is unrealistic. And I think they've confronted that. COVID and then the open payment of players now has just compounded all this. Stanford has raised money. Andrew Luck's presence is not just massive credibility, but massive fundraising, and he's done that. He hired Tavita Pritchard. I think that I could see that hire coming well ahead of time because I thought it made sense on multiple fronts. One is they're good friends. Andrew has a long-term commitment, from what I understand, to stay on as the GM of Stanford football. So he has to be able to work with the coach. Well, that's not a problem with Tavita Pritchard. Tavita understands Stanford. He's a young, well-spoken guy, which means he can handle the front-facing part of the job that I think is a must in today's world. He handles that well. And then the last part was he was not in a position to demand or command a huge payout, a huge buyout, and he didn't get one. And Stanford can't get down. They can't get involved in the idiocy that we've seen around the country with these buyouts. So to me, the Tavita Pritchard hire checked all of those boxes, and now it's going to be, can Stanford attract talent? They're paying as best they can. They still have academic standards that I don't think are going to get dramatically changed for football players. And the last point is that the Stanford ACC arrangement, clearly they needed football. But if you look, and this goes to Notre Dame too, Spence, if you look at half of the ACC, you have North Carolina, Duke, Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, Virginia, and then you throw in Notre Dame, Cal, and Stanford. You have 8 schools that are very similar in that they have high academic standards, high academic aspirations, but they want to play big-time sports.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest attraction for Stanford to make this move to the ACC, was for their entire breadth of their Olympic sports teams to compete against the best. Now, the problem is that that's only half the ACC, and there's another half of that conference that has no connection at all to what I just said. So, that's a long-term challenge. And look, a lot of what happened yesterday in this football thing was created because the ACC is a totally dysfunctional conference. and it's been hanging by a thread since Florida State and Clemson were going to go. And let's be completely blunt here. I mean, you do not need an advanced degree to figure out that to me, the reason Miami is in is had the committee put Notre Dame in and not Miami, there would have been no ACC team. If you have no ACC team in this playoff, the league explodes this week. That's my view. Florida State and Clemson would have gone, just gone. And because the ACC's football structure is dysfunctional, they end up having this crazy tiebreaker. And if Virginia had beaten Duke Saturday, I don't know that Miami would have made it. I think Notre Dame might have made it if Virginia had won that game. But once Duke wins, Duke's not going. There's no way. So you have to have an ACC team. And that's just, I think that's very clear. And then the other element of the whole thing was, Alabama, for the most part, has to lose 5 games in a year to be eliminated. Last year was the exception. And to me, I'm telling you, honestly, I was at my grandson's basketball game Saturday morning talking to other people. I said, there's no way this committee will leave Alabama out 2 years in a row. That there would be such wrath coming out of the SEC that, to me, there was zero chance of that happening, even though Alabama got boat raced in their first game by a bad team, and they got boat raced in their last game by a very good team. But they got boat raced in both games. And they're in, and I'm just being factual here, Miami played one game all year against a team that finished in the top 25, and it was Notre Dame. One game.
Yeah.
And yet you hear Miami defenders say Miami and Notre Dame's resumes were similar. Really? Notre Dame played 3 games against teams in the top 25, and they lost the Miami game, as we know. They lost to Texas A&M on a botched extra point, and they beat USC fairly handily. So, again, the arguments to me are just word salad to try to defend something that is indefensible.
The dynamic of Notre Dame declining the bowl invite, give me your thoughts on that. I was disappointed simply from a consumer standpoint. I think BYU Notre Dame would have been the best non-CFP bowl matchup with 2 teams who feel like they should be in the field but are not. So as an alum, what are your thoughts on Notre Dame electing not to play?
I was 100% thrilled when I heard it. 100% thrilled. The bowl games are senseless with a playoff. The championship games are senseless. They are just naked money grabs. We understand that. The bowl games are senseless outside of the CFP. And what the bowl games now should be are these air quote reward games for the program that goes 6-6 or 7-5. For a Washington State, who I did 4 games of this year, Washington State had this complete breakdown after last year. Everybody left. New coach comes in, and they went 6-6. And for them, there is a somewhat of a reward to get to a bowl game, even though their coach has left, and there are probably going to be a bunch of players going with him. But let's, again, I'm going to be very honest here in my view. I don't think it's very complicated. Notre Dame looked at this situation and said, look, we don't want to be in this bowl game, so why are we going to fake it? And how are we going to convince our players to play hard when this is not a game any of us want to be part of? And secondly, who's benefiting from that game? There's only one entity. It's ESPN.
Yep.
Why would Notre Dame do anything to help ESPN when ESPN's on-air people were openly campaigning for Notre Dame to not be in? I mean, they were covering it by saying Alabama should be in and Miami won the head-to-head, but it was clearly an anti-Notre Dame. I mean, that's been going on for a long time, so there's no surprise. But in my view, this is Notre Dame just saying, okay, we're playing business here. We're not going to be involved in anything that helps you right now. Yeah. And I'll tell you, Spence, I really think this. I truly believe this. The Notre Dame conversation obviously is driving narrative early, just for the obvious reason. I think the biggest narrative to come out of this is yet to be talked about, and I'll talk about it now. How many Big Ten teams got in?
2?
3.
3, yes. Excuse me, 3, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And 5 SEC teams got in.
Yep.
And the last 2, Oklahoma. I mean, Oklahoma really didn't have very good. Did not have a great resume themselves. But anyway, Oklahoma got in, and Alabama gets in. Okay. Who owns the SEC?
Mm-hmm.
ESPN.
Yep.
ESPN also owns the playoff television contract.
Yep.
Who owns the Big Ten? Fox.
Right.
Who has 0 of the playoff. Now, Fox's conference gets 3 teams in. Their rivals conference gets 5. This. I'm telling you, this is the story that's going to come out of this.
Yeah.
That Fox and the Big Ten are not going to stand for this. And you will have, if you don't have a fully expanded playoff in the next go round, and I'm talking 24, if you don't have that, Fox will do something on their own, and the Big Ten will go with them. I really believe that in my heart. And if you look at Fox's social media feed this afternoon, if anybody's listening, just go look it up. I probably on whatever Twitter is now or Instagram. Fox posted what a 2014 bracket would look like today with yesterday's final standings. Here's what a 2014 – that's not accidental, Spence. And so I really believe, again, Notre Dame's story is the immediate thing, and that gets everybody's attention. But the big story out of this is that this current – this will not abide, to quote the dude from Big Lebowski. Fox is sitting there going, this does not abide. This is not going to stand for Fox in the Big Ten.
Ted, last thing, and I'll set you loose on this. I appreciate your time as always. And we don't know if this is the end for Witt. It feels like it might be. He apparently had a deadline of Friday to inform the administration, but it's a big gap between informing the administration and then the public and the media. We may actually never know. Who knows? But a lot of people more plugged into the program believe that this is it for Kyle, more plugged in than I am. If it is, you got to know him over the years. What does Kyle Whittingham mean to Utah football?
It's great. I mean, for my 12 years with the Pac-12 network and the conference, that was the best. I've said it to you many times, Spence, and I'll say it 2 years removed now. It's the best football program over the 12 years of the Pac-12, and that's Kyle. He did it. He had standards. He developed players. He just everything about the way it wasn't just winning, but it was the way they did it. They played football the way that I listened to it all my years with the 49ers. The pros respected the way Utah's program ran and was preparing players who clearly wanted a shot to play pro football. So it's we've seen the ups and downs with the quarterback position during Kyle's run. This year, I will freely admit I did not see very much of Utah football this year. I mean, I know how good Dan Pierre is. I'd watched him play last year in New Mexico. But I can't speak intelligently at all about the way they played this year, other than to know they were in the 15th or somewhere 17th, somewhere around that in the final standings. So what I'm sad for is that this conference blew up. It never should have happened. And I know Utah's administration feels that way, and that Kyle's playing in his final years out, whenever this final year is. They're in a conference that makes no sense. It's I've told you, it's a goulash league. I'm watching the other day, and Fox is promoting, is it UCF against BYU or Cincinnati against TCU? It's some big Saturday afternoon game, and I'm laughing, going, the game means nothing. There's no connection between the schools. There's no rivalry there. So I'm saddened for Kyle and the other school. I mean, Colorado I'm not sad for because they decided they made their own bed, but Utah and the two Arizona schools wanted no part of this. And I'm sad in Kyle's case that whenever his career ends, it's going to be ending in a conference that I'm sorry, it just does not make any sense. Hasn't affected him. They've played well. They had another good year. But it should have been going out playing Oregon and Washington and USC and Stanford and Arizona State. I mean, that's the way it should have ended.
I agree with that, Ted. There's no doubt about it. Look, I always appreciate your time. Happy holidays to you and yours this time of year, and we'd love to have you on again soon. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely, Spence. All the best to you, too, everybody. Thank you.
All right, the great Ted Robinson, broadcasting legend, Notre Dame alum, and I thought he might have some interesting comments on the situation, and he certainly did. Appreciate his time. We'll catch a break. Final hour of the show comes your way next. Move over to the Alex Jensen Coaches Show. Then we'll join Monday Night Football in Progress. Keep it here on ESPN 700. All right, wrapping up. Got to get out of here. The Alex Jensen Coaches Show is coming up on the other side of a quick break. We'll join Monday Night Football in progress. Justin Herbert is active after being listed as questionable. And Omarion Hampton will be in the lineup for the Chargers for the first time since week 4. All right, Porter, played a little golf over the weekend, got out of town for a little bit, and I was on the driving range, and I heard next to me someone talking loudly with their AirPods in while he was hitting golf balls.
That's fun.
Obnoxious. But I looked over, I'm like, I know who that dude is.
Frank Dolce.
It was not Frank Dolce.
Trey Fitzgerald.
It was not Cankles Dolce, nor was our little friend Trey Fitzgerald. Marshall Falk.
Oh, interesting.
He can hit a golf ball,
I'm
man.
sure.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. He has quite a swing. So played some mediocre golf, got out of town for a little bit. Give me the highlight of your weekend. I want one highlight from Porter's weekend.
Ooh, I sat in some hot pots as it snowed in the middle of nowhere, Utah. That was definitely the highlight.
That is a huge highlight. All right. Fun show today, packed college football show. We'll get out of here so Riles and Alex Jensen can take care of you. Porter, what's coming up on a Tuesday edition of The Drive?
Chris Kamrani in studio. We'll go all over the map with CK, mostly college football. Andy Larson stopping by as well. We'll chat with John Kimball on the latest with RSL and, of course, the latest news there. Our friends from the Fierce Fighting Championships will stop by. They got a new exciting event to plug. The last one was a lot of fun. So we'll kind of go all over the map on a Tuesday.
Good stuff. Be a fun Tuesday show. Join us for that. Of course, we'll break down the pro football weekend that ends with Monday Night Football tonight. We'll say goodnight. Special thank you to Scott Mitchell, Spencer Linton, Bill Bush, and Ted Robinson. For any of the sound you may have missed from the show today, go to the website, which is ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download our mobile app and take us on the go. ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. Then finally, for what we do in our space every afternoon, 4 hours, check out a podcast page. It is called The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your shows. So subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments, and give us all the stars. If you like what we do, it actually helps. He's Porter. I'm Spence saying goodnight. Alex Jensen Coaches Show coming up on the other side. Keep it here.